Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm Mary Giuliano, and with me today is Mary Menduk. Welcome, Mary. I'm so happy you agreed to come and talk to us
Certainly my
about
pleasure.
life and times in Fernie.
My pleasure to be here. I made a few notes. Yes, I wanted to start with perhaps the gist of the entire thing. One of the characteristics of Fernie is Fernie has never been a city of lawyers. There were always people who, if something was needed, there was someone in town who would see to it that it was done. And these were ordinary people who saw needs. And I'm happy to say that even at this time, with new people moving in, they are following, they're also volunteering, and they are looking after the needs of the community. And I'm going to go back to the 40s. I'm going to start with the swimming hole that we used to swim at in the Annex.
That's not the same one as what was in Rotary Park, though, was it?
No,
This
no.
was a
That
different
was
one?
a swimming pool.
Ah.
The swimming pool in the 40s was in disrepair. They didn't have the money to repair the swimming pool. So it must have been open in the 30s. And I'm not sure when, but certainly in the early 40s it was not open.
Oh, okay.
And so there were swimming holes. And for instance, all the North End kids would swim at a place called the Cribbin, and it was at the end of the golf course road. And then the Annex people swam actually almost a little further on from where the duck pond is now. We swam there, and all along that during the Depression, I understand they had make-work projects. So they built cribbing, it was called, and it was to keep what is presently now the dike, to keep the river from washing away more of that land. And there was first pier, second. We swam at third pier. And first pier was probably at the end of. Let me see. Probably I can't remember what street that was. Probably 6th, 9th, 7th, 6th. Probably 4th. The end of 4th. And there was a very high diving board there, and only the Pico boys, T.D. Pico and Angelo Pico, were the only ones who could dive off that one. But in our pier, at third pier, there was a raft, and on the raft was a diving board. And the diving board, of course, had potato sacking on it so that you wouldn't slip on it. And there was also a code when our parents would allow us to go swimming, but the older ones would make sure you couldn't go into the river. This was just a backwash. It was not a swift river. And we would swim in the backwash, and if you could do the crawl for 15 strokes, then you could go into the river. And one of the older boys or girls would take you into the river, and that's your initiation, and they decide whether you can swim the river or not. And I never made it to the river, Mary. Curly Bossier was with me. Curly made it to the river, but I couldn't do the 15 strokes. But it was safe for our parents to send us there because everyone knew your abilities. And so our parents
they looked out for you.
They looked out for us, yes. It was a beautiful time there, yeah.
You mentioned the word cribbin a couple of times, and as a child, I used to walk down to the cribbin with all the North End kids.
Yes.
Never knew what it meant until years later. And the cribbin is...
It really means cribbing.
Yes.
Cribbing, yes.
And those are the old railroad ties, no?
No, it was wood.
Yes, it was the old
Just
railroad ties.
Oh, the
I was told.
ties.
Yeah.
Oh, I understand.
That's what I
could
learned.
very well be.
Yeah. They use those, and actually you can still see them down there.
Oh, can you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, I haven't been.
Yeah.
I haven't been there lately, so yeah. But that was an interesting time. We also would skate on this beaver pond, and you can see the beaver pond by Ferry Creek. But the creek, Ferry Creek now is a wide creek now. But in my day, it probably was as wide as this floor, and you would skate in among the trees on the beaver pond. And the boys would build a fire, and there were certain places they would test it out, and they'd say, you can't go any further than this because the ice isn't thick enough. So we would have to walk out there in the cold, put our skates on there, and then walk home. It would be very, very cold going home, but it was take our skates off and warm our feet by the fire, and then go home. But we also had at the Annex school. Now the Annex school was on ninth and ninth. There was an annex school. I don't remember anyone attending that school, but that place had they had an outdoor rink, and the men would stay. There would be volunteers from the annex who would stay up all night. They'd give out a case of beer, and they'd stay up all night, and we'd skate outdoors. But that wouldn't, like, by this time of year they would start. This is December now. Like we'd skate the beaver pond in November, and then the outdoor skating rink and the annex was probably started in December.
Well, you were raised in the annex.
I was
You were
raised
born in Fernie, right?
Yes,
I mean,
I
you were
was.
born here, but
Yes.
you were raised. You were
On 9th
living
Avenue, yes. I
in
was
the
raised in a
annex.
house, and
Mhm.
I was born in a house in the annex, yes. Mhm.
So, you know, this area, and the annex wasn't part of Fernie legally until 1966, I believe.
Well, that part went, yes, that was called the annex extension, and that is from anything from the Red Tree on,
Mm-hmm.
yes, that was the annex extension. And actually from where the 7-Eleven is now, that was, and that was called the Ferry Creek District. Anything beyond there was called the
Really?
Ferry, yes, it was called Ferry Creek District. Hmm. And yes, we joined the city, 1969?
I believe it was 66.
66,
Mhm.
yes. My father was part of that group.
Was he?
Yes, they signed a petition to join the city,
Mhm.
yes. Hmm. Hmm. And West Fernie people, they skated on the river, and I understand North End people skated where Isabella Dickin was. There was water. Did you remember that? Did you hear
By the time we were there, they were all fields that were used for
For food.
planting, for
Yeah,
food,
uh-huh.
yeah.
Hmm.
So I don't remember any water down there.
Yeah, and yes, and now you're talking about planting, and I wanted to talk about everyone pretty well grew their own vegetables, had their own vegetable gardens, and
Well, you were allowed animals in the annex as well,
yes,
weren't you?
yes.
Did your family have any?
Oh yes,
Yeah?
yes. We had a cow, Mary.
Yeah?
And yeah, and I had written all the names of the people who did have cows. Yes, there was Mrs. Bianco. The Bianco family was just down the block. Mrs. Phillips, Roman Miskovich, and the Bashlets. Mrs. Hirchuk used to have a cow, and but there were several up at North End too. Several of the Rumans, I think, and Mary Jerzak, her family, they had cows too.
Oh, even in the North End?
Yes, they did at North End too.
Within
Mrs.
the
Rubin.
city?
Yes.
Wow.
Mhm. And they had chickens too. We had chickens.
Chickens?
And we had chickens, yes. And now my father we had a piece of land, and it was, it would be, now let me see, I did write the, on 12th and 11th, we had our, probably we had about maybe a block and a half of property there. But it was just leased property. For $10 a year from the coal
Mhm.
company, you could lease this property. And it was just like a fairyland for me. Because in June, there would be a swamp, and there would be bulrushes, and then that would dry up. There was a gully, and then that would dry up, and there was a meadow, and there was a creek that even had fish in it further on one boundary, and then a huge wooded area with loads of Saskatoons. So I thought it had everything that life had to offer.
Oh, of
Yeah.
course, and food and water.
Food and water, yeah. And my father would cut the hay by hand. He had a scythe, and he would take his miner's holiday and cut the hay. And it was really, I would bring him a beer and a lunch in the middle of summer, because it would be August when he was cutting the hay. And it was beautiful just to watch him. It was almost like a dance.
Did
to
he
see
have
the
one of
rhythm.
those curved
Scythes, yes,
scythes?
yes,
Yeah, those are
huge one.
what Italians used as well.
Yes, yes. Uh-huh.
Mhm.
And then of course they would have to turn it over and dry it. And then it wasn't baled. Fergie McKenzie used to come with what they called a hay rig, and they would load the wagon with the hay and then load the barn at the back of our lot. Imagine we had a coal shed, a wood shed, a hay barn, and a chicken coop and a chicken yard, and then all the vegetables. But there wasn't much lawn in those days.
No.
A bit in the front of the house
Yeah.
or the side of the house, everything was
Yeah.
planted. And also we had a potato patch. Everybody had potato patches. And with Mr. Audio, my father and Mr. Audio had a place on. It's actually where the red apple is now. And I remember pipes on the top of the earth, so I don't know how they got the water there, but I do remember a sprinkler on a box. So he and Mr. Audio had their potato patch.
Wow.
up there, yes. Yeah, so that was where all the food was, yes. What else was there? Oh, I mentioned all the sheds, yes.
Do you remember the macaroni factory? Was that there, or was that gone by the time?
No, it was
you were...
there. We knew, they talked about it as a macaroni factory, but I don't remember it, Mary. And it was Panotti's house.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, where the IGS apartments are.
Yes, but that was the old Panotti.
Oh, the old Mr. Panotti.
Oh, the
That's
old
where his
Panotti.
house was. Yeah, you're right.
Yes,
I
yes.
was told that.
No, and I know they were talking, I thought, well, that's just a house, when I remember it only as a house. But they talked about the macaroni factory, right. And you haven't heard much more. Well, they made macaroni for town and they sold it.
Oh yeah, they sold it. It
Yeah.
was well known, and I saw photos of the building, which, didn't look like anything huge, but it still looked like an industrial type house, but
Yes, it
very
was
plain.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was one of the first things I remember hearing when I came to Fernie was, oh, that used to be the macaroni
Yes.
factory.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mentioned that.
And there also used to be a brick factory.
Yes, there
Fernie.
was, somewhere in West Fernie.
I think so, because after the second fire in 1908, the city decided that the buildings should be no longer made of wood, but had to be done in brick and mortar. And so they actually started producing. So all of the yellow brick that you may see around town, all of that was produced in Fernie.
And we call it the Fernie brick.
Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yes.
too bad that was another thing that disappeared, right?
And actually, I understand that there's a high grade of porcelain in this brick, and that's why it deteriorated.
Oh.
Yes, so it was the type of clay. And that clay was right from our river. In fact, there are still people there who, that clay bed is still in West Fernie. It's still there for anyone, and a good quality of porcelain also. And I wanted to mention too, the hay barn, when it was empty in the summer, we used to do our rag rugs there. And they would, all you do is you put the nails in the side boards and tie the strings to them, and then
Like on the wall?
the
You
strings
do it on
would
the
go.
wall?
Yes. The nails would be put into the wall, and the strings tied them across, and go all the way across to the other side of the barn, and they had a shuttle, and the string went through the little holes in the shuttle, and you just bang them, and to make all the you'd have take the rag through the string, and then I'm having a hard time explaining this, and then just bang it. And then of course we'd have to do that before we went swimming, and you have to put in your shift in making rugs before you
How
go
big
swimming.
were these rugs? Because they sound large.
Oh, well, you would just leave a space in between each rug.
Oh, okay.
Then you start the next rug further on with the string, yes.
So were these used at home, or were they sold?
The rugs were used at home.
Oh, used at
Yes.
home.
And different people would use the rug, but it was Mrs. Mashira's, we called it a bardo, I don't know what the English word is. We called it a bar. Mrs. Mashira owned it, and so she would have it for her couple of weeks, and then Mrs. Bachelet, and then my mother and Mrs. Zufa, and we'd share this shuttle to make the rag rugs, yes. But it was just for our own use, yeah.
Yeah,
And they're very popular now.
Yes. All the old stuff seems to be coming back. Okay.
Yes, yeah, I know that the Weavers Group, and I think Gail Valance still is weaving rag rugs, yes. That was part of our summer.
Yeah, there was always work, wasn't there?
Oh gosh, there was always work, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and of course, there weren't, we just had one apple tree. There weren't too many apple trees. There are even plum trees in town these days. People are growing plums and pears in Fernie now.
I've certainly seen some of the pears.
Yes, yes. And we would my mother would bring in crates of pears and crates of apricots from Creston, and then preserve them.
Yeah.
Yes, and have enough fruit for the winter, yeah. Pears and apricots, and plums, yes, they were all.
You mentioned a cow.
Yes.
Did you just keep the cow for milk?
Yeah, and we had, we did the whole thing, Mary. Butter and cottage cheese.
Oh, everything.
Yes, we made cottage cheese.
But that cow wasn't slaughtered for meat.
No, the calf was every year, though.
Oh, okay.
The calf was born in the spring, and then it would be slaughtered in the fall. And Louis Maffioli would come and
Oh yeah, Louis.
Louis, and then the Brown Boys used to do it. Yes, and it was we'd have veal cutlets that wonderful veal cutlets, which was a delicacy for us.
Oh, for sure. Oh, gotta mention Louis, because his meat market is on the corner where Big Bang Bagels now is, and who knows what it'll be in the future. But that was for a child, that was kind of an impressive building.
It was.
Because we had no refrigerator, so I was the one that had to go every 2 days and buy fresh chicken for my dad, because that's all he ever ate. And I'd go in, and you'd see that long counter, right?
Yes.
And then another counter over there on that end, and you'd see all these men with, with their saws and
knives. Yes.
Oh, it was impressive.
Yes.
So we'll just take a little break. So yeah, Louis Maffioli was like somebody that was really well known in town,
very well known.
Because
very well known.
he was the one that had the butcher shop. He was Italian. He catered to all of the Italians, and I'm sure everybody else. But he was really funny, because when we finally did get our phone, he would phone, and he would pretend to be somebody else.
Oh.
He would always tease me. Yeah. But he always would call when he had a goat, and because he knew my parents liked
goat meat.
Yeah,
Yes.
goat meat. Yeah, and when he had veal.
Yes. Veal was a delicacy. Yes, sesame
Italians
too.
Yes. Yeah, so it definitely was a delicacy.
Yes.
Because most of these people in these shops really made the town too, didn't it? Don't you think?
Yes, they did. Like the Minton's Pharmacy. Yes.
Yeah.
And the Rahals.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, and the clothing business. Yes.
Yeah.
They were good.
I mean, at one time there were 3 brothers that had businesses in town.
Okay.
Plus the sister. So there was
Nick and John.
Yeah, and there was another one that had the BJ shop. What brother was that?
That was Nick.
That was Nick?
Nick, yes.
And
John had the other one.
And John.
Yeah.
And of course Vic Culture, who was
Vic,
their sister.
Yes.
And I thought there was another one. Was there not another one?
There probably, but not in Fernie. I think he.
Oh, Rahal, MC Cash.
MC Cash, right?
That
MC
was,
Cash.
yeah.
That was the other one.
Yeah.
Yes.
And around the same time were the Quails. There was a lot of Quails. There was 3 or 4 Quails that had business. There was George and Ernie Marshall Wells.
Yes, and across the street was the other one.
Yeah, building supplies, and I thought there was another one as well. And then, of course, when George passed away, his son Doug came in.
Yes. Yeah, and great contributors to the community.
Yes.
And I remember Rose Watson saying one thing about the merchants in Fernie, when things got very difficult in the mine, they were willing to carry the miners.
Yes.
And stay with them. And she says not every coal mining town was this way. Very often, as soon as the mine was going to close, then they took off. They left. The businessmen left. And she says that's something she noticed about Fernie, that the businessmen stayed with their people.
Because if you think back of all the little stores that were in Fernie, because that's all that was in Fernie.
Yes.
As a kid growing up, all I remember are the small stores, Guzzi's, Patterson's second-hand store.
Yes.
You know, the Bartons, Fiorillo's grocery store.
And then the Annex, the Bossios had a store in the Annex.
Yeah, the Saraches.
Saraches had a store, yes.
And even, like MC Cash, the Rahals, the Minton. And we had Robinsons for a long time.
After a while, yes. They were new.
Yeah, Frozen Foods, which burnt down. LaSalle's.
LaSalle's, that turned into Saraches, yes. Were you here when LaSalle? Do you remember LaSalle's?
I was here when LaSalle had their store next to the theater that burnt down.
The furniture
where they
store.
had, furniture and they had like stoves and fridges and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, LaSalle's Saraches used to be LaSalle's too. Saraches.
Oh, did it?
Yes, that was I knew it as LaSalle's.
Oh,
yes.
okay. See, that was.
And
I only knew it as Sarich.
Yeah, and I can remember they said a band of gypsies came through once. Came through Fernie, and so Jenny LaSalle, she says all my grandpa says go close the back door. They're going to keep us busy up front. Go back and close the back door. That was an incident that I remember
Well,
talking about it.
gypsies weren't trusted, right?
No, they weren't.
You know, they really weren't.
No.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I wanted to talk about was the music and the choir. Immigrants who came to Fernie were not going to live without music.
Oh,
were
yeah.
not going to live without drama and dancing. And in my time, the Annex school, which was closed by then, it would be the rink in the winter, and they would have whist drives and dances there. And in West Fernie there was a similar school, and they would have whist drives and dances there. And the Oddfellows Hall was right across from where the college is now.
Mm-hmm.
And they would, yes, and you could dance to a different orchestra every week for a month.
No kidding.
Yes, there were several of
And
them. Yeah.
and the big theater, the Folk Theater, that was so huge. I remember as a little girl that it was like this huge room with. They even had like boxes
Balconies,
on the
yes.
yeah, balconies.
Yes, they had a balcony at the back and 2 boxes up front.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember that. I thought maybe it was my imagination.
No.
So I recall that.
Yes, it was called the Grand Theater.
Oh, is that what it
before
was
the
called?
Vogue. Yes,
And
yes.
I remember talking to a lot of seniors in the past, because I've
Yes.
done tons of stories on them, and they would talk about the plays
Yes.
and how they were also used for the union meetings and
Oh.
yeah, all kinds of things.
Uh-huh.
They said that was a great place to
Yes.
for events of all kinds.
Yes, they had wooden seats.
Oh, really?
Yes, there were wooden seats. Yeah, I remember sitting in the balcony too of that. Yeah, the back balcony.
Mhm.
Yes. Mm-hmm. As a child, yeah.
I know when they turned it into 2 theaters, I really felt sad about that, because I loved the beauty of it, the big theater.
Yes. We had many a St. Patrick's concert there too.
Mhm.
Yes, and I just wanted to mention for the dancing there would be accordions were very popular in
Yeah.
those days, and there would be Fergie McKenzie, Mickey Sosnowski, Tony Pepin, and of course Lloyd Phillips was joined Fergie at the Annex school, and Lloyd played the violin. And was West Fernie, there was Mike Slavins, and he could play a thing called the marimba. Do you ever remember dancing?
I
with Mike
remember
Slavins?
him playing this instrument.
Yeah, that huge
Yeah.
marimba, and it was played with the sticks and and with pom. There was a ball at the end of the stick, but yes, it was called a marimba. Anyway, and he also played the violin and the piano.
Yeah, because I saw him play the violin and the piano.
Mm-hmm.
I forget where, but I remember going to these things.
He was a very talented man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And of course, growing up here, if you wanted to get out of the house, the only way you can get out of the house is if you were in a play or in a choir.
Exactly.
Your mother's not going to let you out in the middle of the week.
No.
You couldn't go to a movie.
No. Choir is right, or
Yes.
or in a play.
Yes. And I can remember, we had a school choir, and then we had a church choir, and Mrs. Caulfield, bless her heart, she was, she didn't have much of a, she felt she didn't have much of a music background. She played the piano, and she could read music, and she could sing, and they needed a choir at the church, so Mrs. Caulfield said, I'll do it. And before you know it, and I know for the years the choir had started my eldest brother belonged to the choir in the late 30s, and I probably joined in about 1949. And we learned 3 new masses, and they were in 4 parts. And she never ever said somebody couldn't come. If you wanted to sing, you could come, and she would train your ear. She'd say, now listen to this, and she always started with some ear training. But we learned, yes, 3 or 4 different masses in 4 parts. And of course, growing up in the Catholic school, we learned the Gregorian chant and a requiem too.
Yeah. I remember learning those in catechism.
And catechism.
Mm-hmm. And plus, my sister Rose and I joined the choir when we were like, I don't know, 12, 13 years old.
The senior choir?
Yeah. Yeah, because
was Mrs. Caulfield?
Lloyd Hamilton had it. Then, yeah. And he was very encouraging of us and wanted us to go, and we sang at midnight mass.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the choir.
Yeah. And before my time, Mrs. Caulfield took the choir to, because they always had a festival in Blairmore.
Yes.
And they won first place one year with Mrs. I believe it was in the late 30s sometime, yes.
I remember Lloyd Hamilton taking the school choir to Blairmore. And the only reason that I was allowed to go was because my dad knew Lloyd, and because Dad had taken evening classes to learn English from Mr. Hamilton.
So he trusted
So
him.
he trusted him, and we went. And I remember Craig Eastwood be one of them, and Kathy Fiorillo, and you know, all the top kids. I wasn't involved with all of the other extracurricular activities, like playing, you know, going to play volleyball or basketball, because Dad didn't allow it. But he did allow the music and the drama, and so I was with that top group.
That was fun. That was fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We won a prize one year too.
Did you?
I think we came in either first or second for our group, for our age group.
Well, that was okay. Yeah.
We all had to wear black. The girls had to wear black skirts, white shirt, and a little black tie.
Oh.
And the boys wore like a white shirt,
a
black tie, and black pants.
Yes.
All a vision of black and white.
And we're there again, eh? Yeah, yes. And also, one of the other choirs that I belonged to was a Slavic choir, and we have the picture of that. There were about, I think when I counted them today, there were 40. 4 of those men in that picture are from Michel Natel, and it was a peace choir in 1948, and it was after the war. So a group of people from the Crow's Nest Pass, actually, they were a communist group, had applied for some funds, and the federal government gave them the funds for this weekend festival. And it was Friday night, Saturday night, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it involved like the Russians, Ukrainians, the Polish. We sang one song for each of them. A Russian song, Ukrainian, Polish, Czech and Slovak, and the Fernie group was led by Mr. Bordanyuk. He's in the center of this picture. And he taught us, we sang a cappella, and he taught us to sing with a mandolin. And my father sang bass, and I sang alto.
Oh, your dad was in the choir too.
Yeah, my father was in the choir, yes.
Is he in that photo?
Yes. No, he wasn't. He's not
okay.
in the photo, no. But he's, yes, and I was really surprised at my father. I said, gosh, I'm really surprised we're in this group. He says, well, I think it would be a good experience for you to learn all the other languages too, you know. Yes. So it was and we it ended up there were about 200 people in the choir.
That's a big choir.
Yes, it was a big choir. We went up one weekend. I remember going up on the train from Fernie to Coleman, and we had a rehearsal the weekend before, and there were calisthenics, and the girls that did the calisthenics had little rings of ribbons, so you would see this flurry of ribbons when they did the calisthenics. And there was also dancing, Ukrainian dancing, and singing and speeches. Yeah, so it was a beautiful weekend, and certainly really.
Can we touch a little bit on that word you used, communism, communists?
Well,
because what did it really mean for people back in the day in this area, and in the Crow's Nest Pass, which really were not that far apart? Do you really think it was political?
Well, I think it was political, yes. And of course there were some. I don't know how to explain this. There certainly there was a great respect for workers, and men mines weren't always safe places. And I will have to say, the unions that were here, I do know that in the 50s, my father said the Crow's Nest Pass had one of the safest working conditions in Canada, they figured. Yes, better than Cumberland on the island, and certainly better than Nova Scotia. Were certainly, and it was these labor groups who made it very, very safe to work in the mines. Safer to work in the mines, and conditions were certainly they really, really considered the men, yes, so.
Do you think that any of them faced any kind of negative treatment because of their belief?
I don't think so. I didn't hear it. We knew people who were, and they seemed just the same as anyone else, yes, so I don't know what to say about that.
So
Mary.
even for work, it didn't matter?
No, no, and I'm not sure that they. I'm not sure how vocal they were about what their beliefs were. I'm not sure about that.
Well, I think it just goes to prove what a great country Canada was and still is.
Yes.
That you really are allowed to practice whatever it is that you believe.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And sometimes, in today, there's all the talk about, the people that are the immigrants.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
And the negativity towards, what they believe in, and you look back and.
Well, it was difficult for the early. I know from my elder brothers and sisters, it was difficult.
Was it?
And my parents, there were difficult times, and even for the Italians, there were difficult times. Yes, yes, for all because we didn't speak the languages correctly. As my parents had an accent and.
Well, if you come as an adult, it's really difficult not to have an accent.
Yeah,
because if you come as a child, you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have no accent. My brother and my sister have no accent.
Yes, yes.
But if you come as an adult, like Nick has an accent. We're gonna take a little break.
He had some Marxist ideas that he believed in, but he still felt that. And he was also a part of a Slovak group. He was the president of a Slovak group, and it was not a communist group. Quiet? Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because I think that people get into certain things because of their economic situations, their beliefs, their friendships, because sometimes if you really believe in somebody, you believe what they tell you, right?
Yes.
So I often look back and I think, I'm so glad that I'm here in Canada where I've been able to have an open mind and learn about so many things and not just get hooked on any one person's direction or belief or expectation. So I often look back at all the immigrants that came. Yeah, they came here. They came with their own beliefs. But as soon as they became knowledgeable and understanding of the language, I think they opened their minds, and
definitely.
The majority of them really changed, don't you think?
Oh yes. They went through it. Well, you have to change it. It's just a process of assimilation. Yes.
Yeah.
You keep some of the traditions certainly, but.
Yeah.
I would say that too, yes, Mary.
The good traditions.
Yes,
which I think it's wonderful to keep traditions. And talking about traditions, what were some of the traditions that your own family kept?
Some of the old traditions?
Yeah, like in food.
Well, yes. We certainly had a huge crock of sauerkraut that we'd make. Yes, and we had a huge slicer and everyone was involved. It was a weekend project. I can remember cutting the cabbage and shredding the cabbage and taking it down to a cellar. It wasn't a basement in those days; they were cellars, and so we kept all our veggies there.
Put it in the crocks?
I put it in a crock, yes, and added salt. And
what made it sauerkraut?
The salt.
It was just the salt?
The salt, yes.
Nothing else?
Nothing else, no.
I often wondered.
And now, of course, we didn't tell people we were eating it because it was frowned upon. And it's interesting that now at the college they're teaching how to make sauerkraut and fermented foods, so it's...
Because they have found that just a tiny bit of sauerkraut is just so amazing for your body, for your health.
Yes. So we did have that. Some of the other traditions, well, we certainly sang, whenever my parents would have people over, we'd have a meal, and they all sat around the table and sang. And I grew up thinking all men danced, recited poetry, and could sing. Because all the men in my family and their friends all, and it wasn't Shakespeare, you know. I mean, they were little ditties they'd learned at school. But one of the men would get up and recite his poem. You know, Mr. Samarduk would have it, and we learned each other's folk songs too. Like Mr. Samarduk sang a song about a rooster, and and Mr. Oh gosh, what was his name? He lives by Cholak. Mr. Cholak sang a song about a little village, and we learned his song, you know. And so everybody had, when they got together, you know what they were going to sing because it was their favorite song. So, but there was always singing, and I can remember my brother and I being in the St. Patrick's concerts and practicing the song,
great.
or even practicing the masses, doing the dishes together and practicing. Yes, and the drama in town was something too at that time. Emma Chubra, who was a primary teacher, she really wanted to go to Hollywood and be a script girl, she said.
Did she?
Yes, she wanted. And she was a school teacher, as you know. And she stayed to look after her mother after her father died. But she would go up to Edmonton to take a course in drama and then come back to Fernie and try everything out on us. And so she was, we would have play practice starting in January, a Sunday night and a Wednesday night. She even did one of the Chekhov plays, I think Cherry Orchard. So she did some other community work, not only for the St. Patrick's fundraiser, but she also did directed other plays. And gosh, for St. Patrick's we do Merry Widow, the Florodora, and at a chorus line. And I can remember Andy Kasmer and Louise Gelati doing the tango on stage and almost falling off the stage.
Oh.
I can remember that one. Yes, that was a great chorus line. So, and also at the other drama group was at the United Church, and that was run by Celia Morgan. And Celia Morgan was the wife of the mine inspector, and she had a degree. They were Welsh. She had a degree in drama, and so she and Emma were in competition. They would take their plays to a festival in Cranbrook or Kimberley, the drama festival, and really they really did a lot for drama in town. Those two women. So there was.
It was a busy town, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. There was lots to do. It was a great place to grow up, Mary. A great place to grow up.
And I mean,
rich.
You know, it was a different time from when I was in Fernie.
Yes.
And I'm listening to you, and I'm just imagining all the activity and, you know, and the times of being together and attending the concerts and going for music and getting together.
We're not voyeurs. We were not voyeurs.
All doing.
Yes, and even when it came to soccer, for instance, there was the West Fernie soccer team, an Annex soccer team, North End and South End.
Yeah.
And then there were fewer at South End. South End joined with West Fernie, and you'd go to a soccer game on a Wednesday night or a Sunday, and if you weren't playing, you were watching. You know, you could.
And everything was down at the North End.
North End at that time, yes.
Do you remember that big stand that used to be there?
Yes,
Where
yes.
people could sit. It was like 25 feet high, if not more.
Yeah. Well, we had one in the Annex too.
Oh, did
we
you?
We had actually where all those small houses, or the coal company houses, that was the soccer field.
Oh, no
in the
kidding.
Annex, yes. That entire 2 blocks was a soccer field, yes.
So there was a lot of places where each section of Fernie
Yeah.
had its own area where they could.
And there were boundaries. There were boundaries. And, you know, anything across the highway was Annex. Across the bridge was West Fernie. And I think North End started the block behind the school on 10th. Probably North End started at 10th Avenue or 9th.
Oh, probably 9th.
9th. North End started
Yeah.
there, yes.
Yeah.
You each had your yes. And I know that Bill Kennedy talks about, he lived in West Fernie, and he was dating Anne, who lived at North End.
Yeah,
He says,
right.
yeah, it was difficult.
So let's talk a little bit about downtown
All right.
and what it was like
What it was like
when
in
you were
downtown.
growing up.
When I was growing up. Well, there was Harper's Pool Hall at one point, and that was across from the bakery. Across the street from the bakery. It is now the optometry building.
Oh, okay.
Yes, that was the pool hall that I can remember. And I'll talk about the bakery. When I grew up, it was a butcher shop, And actually the Casimir boys ran it. And I understand there was a Mr. Johnson who built the bakery.
Really?
And he had he had animals out in a farm out at certainly probably around Cowley somewhere. And he raised the animals there and brought fresh meat in. And then after the Johnsons left, the Casimir boys ran it, and when I was a child. And then it became Pauline's Bakery. And actually Pauline's Bakery, John Audio, she was from the Pass.
Oh.
But it was John Audio's building. John Audio bought the building off the Casimirs.
Oh, did he?
Yes, and John Audio owned that building, and he brought in Pauline. And she was from the Pass, and then after Pauline's...
So what would that be, the 40s, 30s?
Pauline, let me see, 40s. Pauline's Bakery probably in the 50s. Well, wait, late 40s, probably late 40s was Pauline's.
Because when I was a kid and I discovered the bakery, it was Tippy.
It was Tippy. We came in 1959. Yeah, Tippy started the bakery in 1959.
So it was somebody else before
Yeah, and
that.
there were two immigrant boys, two German boys.
Oh.
And actually what happened, then after John Audio sold the building to Mr. Guzley owned the building. And two immigrant German boys, and they were wonderful bakers. And a Coal Creek mine closed, so they left.
Oh.
And so the building was open, and so Mr. Guzley asked my husband Tippy if he would like to be the baker. So we came in 1959, and Tippy was the baker for 15 years. It was Tippy's Cookie Jar.
Yeah, I recall that.
Yes, and then we sold the business. We kept the building and sold the business, and then I'd forgotten his name.
Bill.
It was before Bill.
Before Bill.
Before Bill, yes. And then this man sold it to Bill, yes.
Oh, okay.
So it was 3 or 4 years before.
I remember
Bill took it.
Kathy George worked there.
Yes, that was for. She worked for Tippy.
Did she work for
Yes,
Tippy?
Kathy George worked for Tippy. Yes. Yeah, she was a wonderful woman. Yes.
Oh, she was so gracious. That's
Yeah.
how I got to know her. I used to love going in there. She was always so lovely.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A lovely woman is right. What else in town? Oh, the Barton store. She had the record store. We would buy records, and the photography had our film developed there. Oh, and there was Barton's studio, the photography studio.
Yeah, down on 3rd.
Yes, where all the wedding pictures were taken there. Yes, and pictures of special occasions. Is there anything else downtown? Oh, the barber Patsy, the singing barber on the corner.
Did he sing?
Oh yes, he had a beautiful tenor voice. He would sing La Donna Mobile, yes.
No kidding. Was he in the corner one where Walter has his...
Well, is now,
Yeah.
yes. Patsy
Okay.
was there, yes. And what else was there in town? Well, there was a theater where then it became the Diamond Grill. There was a theater there. There
Really?
was. That was a theater, yes. And it was called the Orpheum Theater.
Oh.
And that was, and actually before the Vogue, it was there before the Vogue, and they were in competition together. And then the Orpheum was a very small theater, as you can imagine. Yes.
I remember the Northern next door because it had great big huge windows, and it had red leather plush chairs that always had older fellas. Well, when you're like 11, 12, everybody's old, right?
Yes,
These old guys that would stare at you as you walked by.
Yes,
But if they weren't around and you could look in the window, you would see this big stairwell going up.
Going up, yes, right, yes. I think that's stairwell is still there too.
I don't know. I haven't been in the northern. I haven't been in the northern hotel.
It's closed off now. It's just go into the hotel.
Yeah, that's right.
It's
You can't
closed off.
see. You can't see it
No,
anymore.
they put
Yeah.
the
And the Waldorf. I
The
remember
Waldorf across the
Waldorf.
street. Yes.
I remember if you looked in the window, to the left was the dining room, and it had white linens.
Oh.
And that was always impressive to me. And
Yes,
it
it
also had a big, huge stairwell with
going up,
beautiful
yeah.
wooden railings going
Yeah.
upstairs. And one of my mother's friends worked up there. Mrs. Gentile actually worked up there.
Yes,
Yeah, because my mother worked at the King Edward. She worked in the kitchen. And the King Edward was a nice
That was
hotel.
a nice hotel in those days, right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I can remember the Waldorf Fire because I was living above the
Oh,
bee
do you?
shop across the street we were living above the bakery at that point, and I remember there was a big sign, a neon sign, and it would say the Waldorf Hotel, and Jincy George was hanging onto that sign and had to be rescued by the fire department because
of
there's
the
a
fire?
Yes, he knew not to go down the stairs.
Right.
And so he was hanging on to, and I know Frank Caravetta lived in the front apartment. He says, Mary, come and see this. So there was Jincy. They did rescue him, yes.
I wonder when that was. What
Well,
year
that had to
might
be
have been?
somewhere between 59, 60, or 61, somewhere in there, yeah. Because by 62 we moved above the bakery. Yes, we moved to the bakery, yes. And lived there for 40 years. Above
40?
The bakery, 40, yes.
Wow.
Probably 3 of that, probably 36 or 37 years, yes.
Yeah, it's a long
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like living right downtown?
It was lovely, really, very nice, yes. Really lovely, I liked it. I felt very safe,
Mm-hmm.
yes, and I think when people live in a downtown area, it remains safe. I know that when they were looking at redoing Toronto, one of the women, I've forgotten her name, and she said, be sure, they wanted to change the whole demographics, and she said, no, let's keep people downtown to keep, because then there's far less crime. People are around, so yes, there's far less crime when people live there, yes.
I remember talking to some seniors that told me how above the cleaners, whatever that building is, what is that building now? Where the dry cleaners used to be.
Yes, yes. It's the oh gosh, what is that one? The glass place.
Stephanie's Glass.
Stephanie's Glass. Above Stephanie's Glass.
They told me that upstairs was an area where they did wrestling and boxing.
Oh.
And they also said that in the 30s and 40s, whenever there was news, they would stick their heads out the window and hear from the newspaper boys on what was going on. And especially during the war, apparently they would open the windows and they would tell the crowds that down what was going on, what was happening. I can just imagine this, all the people, gathered down on Main Street looking out, listening to the news on what was going on with bombing or what was going on with, different activities, because this is how they got their news. And so there was always people downtown, apparently. It was a very busy.
Wow.
And, between the Napanee and what we had, all those bars.
Yes.
That people lived in. And all the apartments above
yes,
the businesses.
Yes.
It was a really busy town.
It was, yes, yes. And it's a wonderful thing that we didn't have the money to redo things when everyone else around us was, tearing down buildings. We didn't have the money to do it, and thank heavens, because we kept it all.
Yeah, I mean, only Fernie's lost a few really good buildings if you think about it. The bank. Where the CIBC Bank is now.
Yes.
That was a beautiful bank there,
Yes, it was.
building. And that was torn down on purpose.
Yeah, and Fire Hall.
Yeah, and also, the Fire Hall.
The city.
City
building,
it was
yes.
beautiful. It had the gates, the wrought iron gates in the front.
Yeah.
I had purchased a painting from, oh my God, the painter that we just talked about. His dad was, his son passed away in the accident at the arena. Oh, what is his name? Vern
Hornquist.
Yeah, Hornquist.
Okay.
Vern Hornquist, was a really great painter, right?
Yes.
And so I had his painting, an original painting of the clock of the bell tower of the fire hall. But he had also done one of the front with the iron gates. And so I purchased a print, because that's the only thing that I found. And before I left, I had talked to everybody, including the fire department, to say, wouldn't it be great if if a new fire hall could have affordable housing on top? And actually my idea was to have the fire hall down the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
Retail up on top, retail and office space,
Mhm.
and then affordable housing
Mm-hmm.
for people that
Yeah,
were
yes.
more
Who need it.
vulnerable. And so when I left, I donated these two paintings to the fire department.
Uh-huh.
And I know Ted, the fire chief, had said, wouldn't it be great if we could do a fire hall with this facade
Ah,
to just show
what it was like?
Yeah, what it was like.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely idea. Beautiful idea.
And I hear that they are looking at doing my idea.
Uh-huh.
I don't know about the gate, but certainly
Uh-huh.
about the housing on top.
Uh-huh. Including everything.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Good idea. You mentioned Hornquist, and Vern Hornquist's father actually was part of a group that did the first ski hill, and it was on Ridgemont Hill. Ridgemont, yes.
I know, I never knew that there was
Yes,
a ski hill
yes,
up there.
Yes, and it wasn't, very grand, of course. But then they moved to Proctor Mountain.
And,
Yes.
yeah.
And then I understand some Rotarians had gone down to Whitefish, and they saw how popular skiing was in Whitefish. And so these businessmen from the Rotary decided, well, why don't we try a ski hill in Fernie and try the lizards? And I know that they sold shares to people in town.
Yeah, they
Yes.
did.
And this is before Heiko's time,
Yeah.
yes. And I think they cashed in those shares when Heiko bought, yes, I believe. But so it was, here are people saying, this is what we need, let's get together, let's do it.
Everything,
Yes.
everything really that Fernie has is, grassroots people saying, we need this, let's do it. And then think about it, the aquatic center,
Yes.
the old pool, really, the
Yes,
first
sure.
pool,
Mm-hmm.
the community centers, the museum, the senior center, the art station.
Yes, yes.
Talk a little bit about the art station, because you were involved with that.
Oh, yes, what could I say about that one? That was a long, long project, and it was certainly, I don't have the vision for a building, but Rose Watson and her family did. Rose put in for when she started the Arts Council, and I believe around 73. And Ray Hughes told her about some funding that was available from the provincial government. And we had both had a rich drama and music background, and she had a very, very rich background in the past. And she said, Mary, our children are not going to have what we had. So she started the Arts Council, and she put in for several different. She looked at the Park Place Lodge when the hospital closed. She says, "Let's look at this one." We toured the building and then thought we couldn't manage that one. We looked at McDonald's Consolidated. She put in a proposal for that. Let's look at that building. Then we looked at the Vogue, the theater itself. We also looked at the place where Urban Settler is now. The garage used to be the Fernie Cartage.
Oh, yeah.
She looked at that one for a home. So she did it over and over and over. She was always looking for a home. And she finally gave it up. She says, I don't think, we're going to, we even looked at a private house at one point. And the city also gave us some land in the Annex on 12th. Some property down there if we wanted to build a.
Oh, really?
Yes, they did. So we had that option for a while, and so she finally gave it up. And then when her daughter joined the art station, I thought, she was going to be interested in children's programming, and she said, "Well, really, I'm interested in a building." And I thought, "Oh my gosh, don't you know what your mother went through?" And she says, "No," she was interested. So I said, "What building?" And she said, "The art station." And
which was the CP rail
CP
station.
rails, yeah, the CP rail station, and it was very dilapidated. And
it had been sitting empty for a long time.
Pardon?
It had been sitting empty for a long time.
Yes, and in fact, and vandalized, yes,
Yeah.
and almost burnt it several times. And so she decided, she approached City Hall, and Frank Lento was very, 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 very instrumental in getting that place. In fact, they had a city council meeting on a Monday to save the building, and on Thursday they were going to burn the building. CPR was going to burn the building on the Thursday, and he had to make an emergency phone call to save the building. But that was Frank, all right. And so they started raising money, and we had a heritage architect who was very, very interested in the building, and we certainly were paying her. A fee, and there were many times when we just didn't have the money, and she just had so much heart. She put in the extra time. But Beth Gregg carried that whole fundraising thing. At one point, they thought they were going to move the building. We were going to move it on logs. We all came out sat in our chairs and had bottles of champagne, hidden bottles of champagne. And they were going to move the building on logs that were larded and then slide it along, and it didn't work. We all came out and brought our chairs and to watch, and it didn't work, and then they had to do it another time. But we didn't call the public out that time because we weren't sure what would work or what wasn't. Mm-hmm. So they moved the building, and volunteers showed up. It was amazing. The electrical work was all done by volunteers. Much of it was done by volunteers. And of course Dave O'Hare was in charge of much of the renovation. And
was he?
Yes, Dave O'Hare was in charge of much of the renovation.
Oh.
And there would be make-work projects, and he certainly brought those people in. And when it came to deciding even the color of the building, Beth was very, very careful about including people. She had 3 different color schemes, and she had people in town vote for what color we would have. And the city council at that time, we were hoping to be completely independent with the restaurant. So we really worked hard to keep the restaurant going, thinking that would do it. And at one point, the restaurant wasn't working, so Beth even took that over. And there were volunteers, Arts Council volunteers running the restaurant. I remember that part.
It was a very popular restaurant,
yes,
too.
Yes, at that time. But
I'm trying to remember what it was called. The Whistle Stop.
The Whistle Stop,
yeah.
Right? Yes, and then it was the Blue Tube. But it was amazing that I remember speaking to someone. I was on a plane flight to Vancouver and talking about all the volunteers that were showing up for the building, and the person sitting next to me, he said, well, those people show up after the building's up. He says, because people want to be there when the building's going. And I thought about it, and those people were not people who were going to be going to it, but they wanted the building to exist.
Yeah.
So and even though they weren't going to be artists, they weren't going to be performers, but they all came out to get the building going. Yes, so it was amazing.
Well, that proves that you need every type of interest to make something happen.
Yes,
really, you
yes.
need every type of person, every type of interest, every type of desire, and you need people with the spark to want to do something.
Yes, yes.
It doesn't matter what that is. It's that whole combination that gives success.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, all of them. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, if you had to say, you've lived through in Fernie through the 40s, I presume.
Yes.
The 50s, 60s,
Uh-huh.
and here we are now, 2019. What stands out in your mind as being the biggest change and the biggest similarity?
Oh, well, I've been interviewing people who moved to Fernie for several years now. And I've been actually writing down their comments. And what I come through is, what I come to as a basis, they say, well, I come to ski and I like the biking and I like the hiking and they say community. And so you have to go further than that and say, what is it in the community? And the basic thing that I hear is, this is a caring place. People care for each other. And the other one was respect, also respect for each other. And a sense of belonging. I feel like I belong here and I have a sense of connection. And I think the people who left felt like they no longer belonged. And this is why you leave. So I think we have to really identify what keeps us here. And it's a deeper thing. It's a deeper thing than just the mountains. And I think it is a sense of belonging. And I remember one interview, I spoke to a couple at Chautauqua, and after some music, he came over. He says, "Well, I came to ski." He says, my family and I came for 52 weeks out of 56, so we figured we'd better move here." He said, but really, he came after a song or two. He says, "I'll tell you what, I can go into any activity, and it doesn't matter who I am or what I've got. We're together with this activity. It doesn't matter what I have or what I possess. We're in it together because we like to hike or we like to do whatever." So that is certainly a quality. So what has changed is, and the volunteerism is still here. It's wonderful. We have new people who come in and want to volunteer. That has remained. Certainly, the look of the city has changed. yes. It's a, yes, we've done a lot with downtown, and you did a lot with the beautification of downtown too, Main Street.
I love beautiful things.
Yes, yes.
Including towns.
And it shows, Mary, yeah. So that's certainly some of the change.
But the one thing I didn't mention anything about you, and for somebody who's watching this 100 years from now, I bet they're saying, but who is this woman? And so I'd like people to know that you were born and raised in Fernie. You were a teacher, an educator, you're an artist, you sing, you're a musician.
Thank you, Mary.
You have, and I think in Fernie, for a lot of us people that know you, and everybody knows who you are, I think the most important thing is that you were always there, supportive, and listening to people.
Well, thank you, Mary. Thank you.
That's what I think is, you give that connection to people.
Well, I like to know what inspires people. You know, what turns you on? Why do you do this? I do like to know why people go there, or what happened to them in their early life. Was it a teacher, or was it a book, or was it a parent? It's amazing where we gain our inspiration. Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's so true, but I have always thought that besides parents, because a parent is the most impactful person in a child's life.
Yes, yes.
The next person that is just as important is a teacher.
Yes, yes. I've been affected by teachers.
Yes,
I have been,
and
yes.
sometimes I wonder if teachers understand how much they do impact the kids that they're around.
Not always good either, Mary.
Oh no,
and then we don't reach all children.
Yeah.
We don't reach all children.
Well, I mean, you can't reach every child. However, you know, my sister taught for 36 years. My brother-in-law taught for 34. I have a niece who's a teacher who's been teaching for, I think, about 10 years. So, you know, I hear, and I have had friends that are teachers, and you know, I know how they try their best to do it,
yes,
but
yes,
it's
yes.
true. You know, I remember one teacher saying to me here at Isabella Dickens, saying, you know, if only I had known that child was being abused at home, I would have treated him differently.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know, even as a teacher, but yet, you know, a teacher is so important. I've always valued teachers, and I've written many stories praising teachers, because I cannot say enough good things about the good teachers. Of course, there's always bad moments for everybody, where you might be snappy and rude or whatever. But for the most part, you know, teachers are so important.
Yes, yes.
It's such a valuable profession.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's the most valuable profession.
Well, I certainly enjoyed my years of teaching.
Yeah.
Certainly, yes.
And when you impact people so that they'll always remember you kindly, wow. Mm-hmm. And so you're very much respected in this town for everything you've done, Mary.
Thank you.
So for anybody that's watching this and don't know who Mary is, I hope I let you know a little bit about who she is.
Thank you.
And also, I can say that I call you my friend. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So you have a story.
I have a story. It's a mining story, and it's a story about fear for children. My father was a coal miner. He had tried other work in Canada, and he heard. Actually, he came to Fernie after an accident, and men were afraid to go into the mine, and he didn't.
From where?
He'd been in Nelson. He was trying. He actually came and he worked at Picture Butte when he first came to Canada, and then on a farm. And then he says he realized the farmer couldn't. He says, I can give you room and board over the winter, but I can't pay you any wages. And so my father thought he would lose the money that he had, and so he went up to Leduc and looked for work, and then went to Nelson, and he worked at a mill in Nelson, and then he had to walk 10 miles to go to work in Nelson. So it was really it was a difficult task, and so he heard that they were looking for miners, because some of actually it was the Casimers and the Barons, or they were from the same village that my father was from. So he came here, and they were paying very good wages because men were afraid to go back into the mine. And so yes, he was a contract miner, and when I was in grade 6, and I heard one of my schoolmates say, the most dangerous mine up there is 1 East, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's where my father works. And so I came home that night, and my father was going night shift, and I remember the whole procedure. He would have a nap after we'd had our supper. He would have a nap, and then my mother would sit with him, and he always liked a sandwich and an apple. And my mother would sit with him, and then she'd go to the back porch, and she'd stand, but it was one of those lights that you pull the little switch, the little chain. And so when he got to the gate, he would always turn around and wave to her, and then she would turn the light out. But she wanted him to have light along the path.
Right.
So I thought, and I'm in bed. I hear him leave the house, and I know the procedure. She'll see him out. And I thought, I might not see my father tomorrow morning. I could not sleep that night, worried that my father I might not see him. So I was going to the Catholic school at the time, and so I knew which way he would come home, and I thought, well, maybe I'll see him. And all that morning at school, I was worried about him. And I got home at lunch, and of course the shades were drawn. And we all, as miners' children, you know that when the shades in the bedrooms are drawn, you don't make any noise around those places. You know the miners are sleeping during the day, they're night shift. So that night at dinner, I said to my father, are you afraid? Are you afraid when you go to the mine? He said, oh no. He says, I'm not afraid. And he said, and I said, well, and I'll tell you why I'm not. He said, you have to work very, very carefully and listen to all the sounds in the mine. You have to, and they put up timbers and he said, you have to make sure the timbers are up. And he said, and by the way, he said, if I am working with anyone that I think is not working safely, I can ask for another partner. Now, where in the world today can you ask for another partner because you don't think they're working safely? And they would give them to you because they knew for your own peace of mind. So he said, no, he says, I wasn't afraid. So I thought, well, I have nothing to be afraid of because my father's not afraid and they're looking after everything. However, I found his diary, and the diary, when he first went into the mine, he said, I was afraid to go in, but I knew I had to go. And it was, yes. Oh. So he wasn't completely without, for me as a child, he did tell me that he was not afraid, but when I found his diary, I did find those words.
I can't imagine that anybody was not fearful of going into underground mining at one time. Especially photographs that show that they had like this much space to crawl in and dig. I just recently saw some photos and I thought, oh my God, how did people survive that work? How did they go in every day?
Yes, into the darkness.
Into that darkness.
Yes.
Really amazing, courageous people.
Yes, yes.
Truly amazing.
Yeah, yes, they were.
And the families too,
yes,
fear.
Those people, yes. Yes, that's true enough.
Yeah.
There's always that hanging over you.
Yeah. Yeah, life is a bit more easier these days, that's for sure. Well, that was a beautiful story. Yes. Thank you, Mary. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming and doing this with us. And I certainly hope you enjoyed our session today.